The term strategy is probably the most overused in any corporate setting. In our industry, in pharma and in MedTech, where we constantly talk about transformation, change is the only constant. But being able to execute the strategy seamlessly is another story. On this episode, I am very happy to have a commercial leader in pharma, a commercial leader who specializes in filling that gap between high-level strategy and on-the-ground execution. Before we start, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. It is very important and very helpful to us. Thank you so much for your support to Amplifiz Pharma and MedTech Innovation Podcast. Andrés van der Walde, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with your large audience in the pharma and medtech industry some of my ideas and opinions.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because you accept not only my invitation, but you accept to do something a bit different than what we usually do, because we're going to purposely be a bit controversial together. And what I mean by that is that we need to challenge some of the concepts that are often heard and overused maybe in our industry. So the first thing I want to start with is probably around organizational change management. We hear about it all the time. Many of us in large organizations recognize that this is pretty heavy and pretty troublesome process. We have some folks who have a lot of reservation about this as well. What's your take on organizational change management, and how do you believe we could reinvent it?
Well, I think the first element that should call our attention is probably that we're still listening a lot all the time about it, because when I think about what is the, let's say, foundational moment of people realizing that change management is going to be something big in the business, is with this book, Who Moved My Cheese, that is from 1998, right? I was at school at that time. So what is surprising is that we are still talking about change management as if it is something new, as if it is something that requires a new way of thinking or of adopting compared to other things that are well established in the company, like finance, like commercial, like HR. Well, change management is something that should be nowadays natural and ingrained within the ways of working of the company. But the truth is that it's treated as something exceptional, right? So it's not exceptional. It's the first one. The second one, I would say, is that the reason why we hear all the time about it is because people is very concerned about only one important, fundamental, specific aspect of change management, while typically forget about others. What I'm referring to is that in change management, it's very important to gain the minds and hearts of the people, to have the right alignment, to ensure that there is the right mindset and predisposition to do these type of things, and the capabilities, which means that when you are going to do change management, you are over-obsessing about people, listening about it, having posters at the office, listening to talks from the management, and ensuring that the idea is in the mind, that resonates, that it sounds reasonable, that you know the what, the how, the why, etc., etc. But then after that, what happens?
What you're saying is that we spend too much time and energy focusing on winning people's mind and heart, but we fail to give them clarity or ways of implementing that change. Is it what you're saying?
We don't spend too much time on aligning and predisposing people and giving them the capabilities. So what happens is that we spend too little time on understanding what goes next, right? So when you take a look into change management, traditionally there are like three groups of people. You have the people who loves the change, who are innovative, who want to embrace new ideas, new ways of working. You have very traditionalist people who really don't believe in it. But you have a very wide, strong core people, a group of people who only need a clear path with clear proofs about why this thing that sounds so amazing in theory is actually going to work in the practice, and it's actually going to help me in the day-to-day. So my point is that we need to dedicate much more time on understanding how this change is implemented in the day-to-day. What are the implications? And one of my main points when I talk about change management, about introducing new ways of working, is to be obsessed with what can go wrong.
So talk about this a little bit more.
So to give you an example, there is a brilliant idea around how, if we apply dynamic segmentation and targeting processes, we are going to be able to cater seamlessly to the needs of our customers, right? So if I tell you the idea and I give you the example of many tech companies that are actually collecting information through apps and are being able to deliver a customized experience to the different customers, you listen to it and say, okay, it makes sense. Let me see how we translate that into our work. Now, to put you an example of the pharmaceutical industry, if you want to do exactly that, first of all, you need to collect quality data, and that is not easy. Second, you're going to collect that data through different systems, because the way in which you interact with your customers is going to be sometimes in person, but sometimes in the doctor's office, sometimes it's going to be on an event. Sometimes I will interact with them through a webinar, sometimes through an email, sometimes through an instant messaging platform. But can I integrate all these different sources of information just to start with? Well, this is a real difficulty. It's not an easy problem to solve. It requires to have the proper taxonomy, to build a common data platform. But hey, now you are obsessed with what can go wrong. You understand that while most of the people is talking about how this is going to be mind-blowing because we're going to be able to cater to the needs of our healthcare professionals in real time, you're already thinking, okay, just before trying to do a segmentation and targeting exercise, are we going to be able to put together all these databases? Because maybe not. And if we are not going to be able to put together all of these data points, forget about putting a layer of business intelligence and data analytics, then putting a predictive model that is going to cluster your segments, then understanding what's the behavior of the customer, and then based on that, doing that recommendation. If you're not obsessed with what can go wrong, you probably are going to fail. And the problem is that since we are talking all the time about this future outlook, about how the company is going to evolve, and then right away, as you start to try to implement these type of things, you're going to face the challenge. What happens is that at the end of the day, you have a lot of resistance, a lot of cynicism in the people that understands that this is just another flavor of the year. But at the end of the day, just as all these innovative ideas, it will die by itself over time, and they will continue doing exactly the same thing that they were doing. So people learn to be in the wave of hype and happiness about what is new, and at the same time, privately continue doing whatever they are doing, waiting to see, is this real or is this not real? Because most likely it will not be real. So let's go with the flow.
But let me be a bit controversial here, or maybe playing the devil advocate for 1 second. Being obsessed with what can go wrong sounds like a perfect excuse for someone who doesn't want to change. I'm putting myself again in the shoe of the one who is going to object against change, right? There's so many consequences of doing it wrong, making mistakes or whatever. If we obsess on that, one would argue, and that's what I'm doing now for the sake of discussion, that if I'm always focusing on what can go wrong, I never dare to do anything new. What's your take on that?
My take is that it all depends on the mindset that you have. Because to what end are you trying to understand what can go wrong? You're just doing it for the sake of having a successful implementation.
Now I want to go back to the cynicism that you talked about that we see sometimes in large enterprises for the reasons you described, where they don't really buy into it completely and they just wait for that new flavor to vanish over time, as you kind of touch on. How do you tackle this?
So what typically you do is you take a group of very talented people who have the right mindset, who believe in it in their hearts, and who are very talented, right? People really know how to do it and make a lot of money out of it, right? And you put them to do it. So it's not very abstract conversation. It may be a pilot with using AI for improving call quality. It may be a pilot for dynamic targeting. It could be a predictive model for target setting, whatever, right? And you put this group of people to work on a pilot. The concept of the pilot is I'm going to let these very clever and very capable, very aligned people work on this end to end. And I'm going to show the results. And the moment I show the results, the rest of the organization will see and will believe. And then we just have to implement. Well, what happens in the corporate world is what happens if you go with the Singaporean model to one of the political parties in Europe or one of the ruling the governments in there and tell them, hey, you know, we have the magic recipe to have a affluent and peaceful, seamless and frictionless country. And they will give you the look like, as you know how complicated this implementation is going to be, right? So what happens at the end of the day? That you have two groups of people that are working in completely different lines of thinking. You have ones that are obsessed with delivering the result on small scale, end to end, so they are able to prove the value of what they are doing. And you have other ones who are heavily pressured to deliver a target on the short term. So the moment they hear about implementing all this magic about this tropical island, say, hey, you know what? I cannot afford to start doing these things. I need to deliver on my target. So what finally happens in the companies is that they start creating what I call the Museum of Innovation. The Museum of Innovation is a place where you put all these beautiful pilots. They work. The technology is true. It is possible to make that change in the organization, and the pilot is showcasing part of it. But they only survive on positive praise, on likes, and on corporate reinforcement, because in the reality they are not engineered for execution. To give you the thing that we were talking about, segmentation just before, is a very good example. Like you have to understand what are your customers. I was talking about different channels. No, we can take it from a different angle. You need to integrate different data sources, right, to build the behavioral model. Or you have prescription data from one provider, prescription data that is different for another provider. When you put that information and you give it to the group that is doing the pilot, they are very talented, So when you are thinking, okay, how are we going to integrate all this data and start producing the segmentation? Say, hey, no problem. Just give me the raw data. I'm going to work with it. If they are a little bit old school guys on Excel, if not, they're going to work with it in Python, and they are going to make the magic happen, right? Okay, now, in my current capacity, I am responsible for the customer engagement and capabilities in Asia Pacific, right? Now I need to roll out this in many countries. Am I going to have these talented people who can crack on Python the integration of the different data sources? Am I going to have these different data sources available in the different countries? So the moment I start rolling out this pilot that, by the way, showed amazing results real results, just like Singapore with the very religious tolerant, you can also show very compelling information that shows how this pilot is going to deliver top line and bottom line savings. The moment you try to roll it out across different geographies, or I was working in Spain in the past, across different provinces, you're going to meet with a lot of friction. So if you don't tackle that on purpose from the very beginning, you're only going to reinforce this dynamic in which you have two people talking completely different language. People who are the realists and are very proud about it, that, hey, I am delivering on the top line target, I am on the day-to-day. And then your clever, talented guys that are only doing the innovation. But these two worlds will live in parallel tracks.
How do we make sure that there's no two companies into one, but there's really this innovation that is ingrained into the day-to-day business? What are the recipe to do it?
So I think the recipe is to work with what I call proximate objectives. So it is understanding how each of the elements of this innovative initiative that you're going to implement is going to add value to the business, and treating that small piece, that small pilot, as a proof of implementation. So you can only move forward if that specific thing is working. For example, take the digital engagement with HCPs. If you want to do an effective digital engagement with HCPs, one of the first ideas, and by the way, it works to a certain extent, is I'm going to build a centralized center of excellence in which I'm going to integrate all the different elements of this process, right? But this process is going to meet with resistance. You're going to try to, for example, do the MLR approval, the medical, legal, and regulatory approval of this. There are two ways of doing this. When you have the center of excellence, these clever guys are going to tell you right away, you know what? This is a bottleneck. This is a choke point. So I need to find a way in which I can speed up this process, right? So probably they will have a dedicated team of people that is going to be doing the review of some sort of content in a way in which they can move faster, right? Now, is this a recipe for implementation at scale? No, because then I'm going to have a team of omnichannel managers who are working in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in the Philippines, who are working across all this region. But they are not going to have a dedicated team of people who will stop what they are doing to do the MLR approval just because I want to launch my campaign. Okay, so now I need to engineer to solve that. What is the process that I need to follow so this MLR approval process is integrated in the day-to-day of the medical, the legal, and the regulatory team in a way in which it is not disruptive for their core chores, and at the same time, it's not stopping the execution of the campaign. That is the type of thinking. Now, what is the best way to work with proximate objectives? You put a KPI on it. You put several KPIs on it. You put process KPIs and results KPIs. And some of those process KPIs are going to give you the alarm or the signal if something is not working. If you know that you need to have the process approved in a number certain of days and you check and this is not happening, then you know that you need to re-engineer. But you're not going to do a large omni-channel initiative talking to all the organization about how digital is going to change everything and is going to disrupt the ways of working if you have not first solved this problem about the MLR approval, because then you're going to face all that cynicism.
One thing we talked about before together, and I wanted to bring up today, was again that concept of innovation museum and what you call the tech sovereignty. You want to explain a little bit what this entails?
Yes. So it is all about leadership and ownership, right? So what happens with most of these innovations is that there are two mindsets typically in leadership. What I call the mindset of 0-100% or black or white, right? In which if you are going to bring an innovation, we only want it if it's going to deliver the whole promise. But you're not happy with it delivering part of it. It reminds me a lot when I was discussing in the past with one GM and I was trying to introduce some advanced analytic models precisely with all the problems with supply and sales and trying to better predict what was going to be our targets, what could be our targets, what was going to be our achievement, right? But the mindset is, hey, I only want this type of thinking if it's really going to tell me what's going to happen. If it's not going to tell me exactly what's going to happen, I'd rather prefer to do it the old school. Because the old school, I know. And that goes to the second point of the mindset, that is the sovereignty over the process. You cannot treat these new ways of working or this innovation as a black box in which you simply delegate to other people. You as a leader need to own the whole process. So many times, what happens is that you want to introduce, again, new ways of working, either digital, AI, or whatever. And it's like, okay, guys, I like the music. I like what you're telling me. I would love to see the results. Let me outsource it, and it will operate as a black box, right? I will give you resources. I will give you time. And please, do the magic for me. So this person is not owning.
So you mean he wants the outcome, he wants the output, but he doesn't understand how the mechanic works. That's what you're saying?
Exactly. He just don't want to own the process that is the secret sauce for success. He doesn't want to understand the in and outs. That's why, for example, when you do a machine learning model for prediction and you say, hey, this has this likelihood of being right, but don't get me wrong, the market is pretty complex. If I knew what is going to happen with the sales of this product, I would not be working here, I would be betting on the stock. So I'm going to give you 50%. I can prove you, and I even mathematically can prove you that this is significantly better than the dated model. But this will never go to the 100%. And then the mindset is, then I don't want to know. Put it in a black box, give me the outcome, and let's pray for the good outcomes. But if not, leave me alone.
But what are you trying to call out here? So some of the leaders want the certainty, want the outcome. They don't necessarily want to understand how we get to that result or the likelihood of this. But what's the main takeaway from this, or what's the pitfall that leaders should avoid falling into, and why?
The key takeaway is that there is no such thing as a free lunch, Like there is
a
free lunch. Yes, there's no free food. It's always going to cost in one way or in another way, right? So there is no way in which you are going to simply implement a new process or a new way of working and get the outcomes and, oh, wonderful, that happened. It comes with a cost. If you want that it really works, you need to roll your sleeves, you need to get your hands in the mud, and you need to understand the ins and outs of this process. One of the temptations that we have as leaders is to say, hey, why don't we simplify? But simplify is just a way in which we just want to hide all that complexity under the carpet, and we just want that someone, somewhere, lost in the matrix, probably a clever guy, will solve it for me. So I can only get the results without all the burden that implies going into the complexity, the details, and the deep work that is required to make something happen. Even the most simple thing, even a toy, when you are assembling it with your kid, requires some sort of attention to detail, requires to take a look into the instructions, requires some sort of deep thinking, and it requires to dedicate some time to it. Mm-hmm. So, as I was saying, there's nothing as a free lunch. It's going to cost you some time, some dedication, some brain power.
Right. And so what kind of leaders are you talking about here when you say they need to be very much hands-on? Because one would argue that, obviously that due to the multiple layers of the organization, that's why companies are, 100,000 people organizations, right? There's a lot of functions, a lot of talents, a lot of different roles and responsibilities are defined. So when you say leaders need to be more hands-on, you want to...
One that is able to speak competently about a matter with the people who is executing it. So understand
Right.
what are the benefits and what are the risks associated with it. Someone who knows that this is not just something that will operate through magic. Someone who understands what are the complications and the perks associated with this whole thing, and who can talk the same language of the people who will have to do it. So together they can share that responsibility. When I say share that responsibility, I also want to highlight another aspect of the leadership. Of course, responsibility is shared, but one of the reasons why we need leaders is because someone needs to take that burden, right? So what is not okay is to take credit if the things go right, but if the things go wrong, hey, I was a very busy leader. I am on the big topics. I am just checking the P&L statements and the PowerPoints and pointing out to what is wrong.
Yeah, that is not exactly leadership, that's for sure. When you look at the industry at large, not necessarily just your organization, but what you hear, what you see from other peers, competitors and counterparts, do you see clear examples of that flexibility, that organizational plasticity, that data-driven engine that is, sustaining itself, or is it still a far, far away land?
No, of course I see it, and it's happening more and more every day, because now leadership is understanding how these things work, because again, these things are not new. All these ideas around implementing better data, better predictive models, digital, whatever, have been in the market for long. So yes, it is happening. The only thing is that sometimes people don't see it because they are different. In what sense I say that they are different? For example, you take what I typically call the Amazon fallacy, right? Because I am visited by consultants every time that are telling me about very good ideas about what we can do, right? Mm-hmm. So one of those ideas in the lines of what we were talking before is, why don't you put all your data points together and start understanding better what is the behavior of your customers, and based on that, you can start executing better different type of digital campaigns. Okay, the music sounds amazing. I want to do it. And I'm sure anyone who listens to it wants to do it. But then you think about how these algorithms are built, right? They are built in a way in which they are going to take limited number of touch points, but significantly more touch points than anything we can dream of in the pharmaceutical industry, and based on that, you're going to make a recommendation, right? But what happens if Amazon recommends you the wrong socks? Hey, nothing happens. It's going to make another recommendation and another recommendation, and probably by the third time, they get it right. What happens if one of my specialists and oncologists and diabetologists want to learn about a specific aspect of the security of the drug, and I deliver a message about efficacy? Well, this is not a risk I can take. So my model is going to look different. It's not going to be Amazon-like. It's going to be Pharma-like. I see very promising things that could happen very soon in the industry. Just so we don't undertone the conversation about the possibilities in the future. The possibilities in the future are there. One example. During all this time, we have been trying to learn better about the perceptions of our customers, our HCPs. We have been trying to learn better about what our field is doing. Are they visiting this customer? Are they telling them this message? Are they handling effectively this objection, right? And so far, we have tried different solutions, right? But those solutions come with a lot of friction. So, of course, we have CRM systems. And in these CRM systems, the problem is that we may have something that is not compliant. So we sanitize the possibility of reps putting notes in there, and we just give them drop-down menus or whatever. Did you say this? Yes, I said it. Okay, after a while we said, okay, but did the guy really said it? because I really want to know, not because I want to control the guy, but because I really want to know what's working or what is not working. So then we have all these e-details, right? The digital devices that are going to help me to capture that information automatically. Like, okay, let me show you this slide and someone is capturing in the background, okay, he's showing this slide with this key message. But then what happens is that it's not agile to move through them. Reps hate them. Sometimes there's no connection to the internet. So nowadays, we have the possibility of recording in real time whatever is happening. In less than a second, analyze it and erase it for compliance reasons. And now all of a sudden, we can understand a lot of the things that is happening in that call. We can understand what were the key messages delivered, what were the objections, what was the sentiment of our customer. And the worst thing that we can do with this is then try to control the rep, because then the technology will fail. Again, engineering and obsession on what can go wrong. So you need to provide it as an armor for the rep, something that is augmenting their capabilities. Something similar is behind the next best action. I think that one of the reasons why next best action fails is because it kills the agency of the rep. Typically, the reps that you want to keep, the reps that you love, are the ones who know very well what they can do. And what they just want is some ideas, some insights, some recommendations so they can improve what they are doing. The only person that really benefits from next best action is a person who is very junior and doesn't know what to do next. But we were building a tool that was intended to help us to have a seamless experience with a customer, not a training tool for junior reps.
So you're saying that NBA is offered, the next best action is offered challenging or killing the agility of the more seasoned reps. Is it what you said?
Well, I think there is
the creativity or the...
Of course, the reason why some salespeople are successful is because they know very well what they are doing. That's why would you rather prefer to hire someone with 15 years of experience in the field than someone who has just received their MBA from a top school and put them calling on HCPs. The moment in which you are using all that rich information, we were just talking about the possibilities of recording, analyzing, and deleting. So we know how was the opening, if the rep was doing questions, what was the feeling of the doctor, etc., etc. Now, if we use that and use it as a corset to force the rep to do something in particular, probably we're killing our best talent. What we need to do is to enable them to do a better work. So that's why NBA requires different use cases. For me, next best action, amazing for junior people who's starting on the work. Next best insight, amazing for those guys who we don't want to lose because we know that they are amazing in the field in front of the doctor.
Thank you so much, Andrés, for taking the time to share some of your experience with me. Very insightful. I hope you had a good time.
It was my pleasure. I had a wonderful time.
Come back anytime.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching Amplifiz Pharma and MedTech Innovation Podcast. Make sure to subscribe, to leave us some questions, comments, and see you soon. Thank you.